Hello, I'm Ben. This is the Adidas Takumi Sen 10, but is it any good? Fans of this shoe, version 9, can breathe easy as version 10 takes over with ease. And it is a pretty similar shoe, but also a bit different. How do they do that? Anyway, some stats. 33 at the back, a 27mm at the front. That's a 6mm drop from heel to toe. I'm going to call this a racing flat. It's nothing, it's a far cry from racing flats of old, but it kind of sits within that group of what is considered a racing flat these days. Version 10 weighs 248 grams in a UK 12, that is 10 grams heavier than version 9, and it retails for £170. There are some very subtle differences from version 9 to version 10, which may not look like much on paper or on foot when you're running in them, but all those little changes all come together to create a really rather refined, pacey little shoe. Now, the original upper on version 9 was a uniform weave throughout. Version 10 has a dual density weave, and by that I mean that there's a slightly more open upper when you get towards the laces. Around the bottom of the shoe is slightly more closed off. This adds a bit more give. We're talking very small amounts. It's very much a race shoe, so it's meant to be tight and fit, secure to the foot, but there is a little bit more give in the upper. Another big difference between the two shoes, I'd say, is the tongue. This tongue is more familiar in sort of material to the Pro 3, but it comes with the added bonus of a little bit of minimal cushioning on the top of the tongue. Version 9 had just a straight, flat material tongue. Possibly could be a bit of pinching or hot spots on the top of the foot with that. This has got a little bit of cushioning. Now, this shoe has come out before the much awaited Pro 4. So am I going to say that this tongue might feature on the Pro 4? Yeah, I am. I'm going to guess at that. That might be what happens. Some structural elements around the heel which are a little bit different, which will appeal to a few who had any issues with version 9 on the fit of the heel. Version 9 was quite rigid at the back. Also, the heel pads were quite close together. Version 10, that's changed. Either the heel pads are now wider at the back of the shoe, giving more room for the Achilles. Plus, there's a nice little cutaway on the back of the shoe here, which can help alleviate any pressure that people might have felt before. It's very comfortable in the heel. Version 9 was comfortable for me in the heel. Other people didn't like it, but this shoe they've addressed that. Moving on to the midsole. Now, we've still got 2 layers of Light Strike Pro. This is Adidas's premium foam, and it does a great job of being propulsive, great energy return to it. If you're familiar with it, then this shoe will deliver exactly what you expect it to do. The big news with this, though, is it now features Energy Rods 2.0. I know, calm down. So, version 9, that was individual rods all sort of layered in between the two things. Now, Energy Rods 2, these are the glass fibre infused rods. Now, these are different to the carbon infused rods that you find in the Pro 3, but they're just as effective in this shoe when it comes to stabilising the shoe, stabilising the foam, and also adding a degree of propulsion. The other big thing about this is the shape of the rods. Now, before they were sort of individual rods, all sort of like layered up into the foam. Now, this Energy Rods 2 is a uniform, one singular component. The Energy Rods come down the foam, they cross over in the heel, and then they sort of stick together, so they move in unison, which makes a big difference to how the shoe feels. More on that later. Going to get into the outsole now. The rubber, people might not be that bothered about the outsole, but I think it just helps just sort of break down the differences between the two shoes in terms of feel and how they feel on the run. Version 9 had a slightly sort of channeled piece of rubber on the forefoot. Now this version 10 has a slightly slick version. The rubber that runs along the lateral side of the foot, that's pretty much the same, but though it continues all the way down on version 10 to the heel. The channel gap at the back of the shoe at the heel between the two pieces of outsole rubber, that's slightly bigger. You can see here, slightly wider. It doesn't really affect how the shoe feels, but it's just a sort of indicator of where they're taking the shoe, that sort of like transition between the heel and how it strikes the floor. Similarly, version 9 had quite a large piece of rubber that wrapped around the shoe. That doesn't happen in version 10. So, all the details, all the minute tweaks that you see there, but what does that mean when it comes to running in this shoe? Well, it's a very reassuringly tight shoe. I'm not going to say it's narrow. There is a narrowness to the forefoot, but it's not uncomfortably narrow. I mean, I don't have particularly wide feet. I don't have particularly narrow feet. I'd say they're pretty bang average. And for what this shoe is designed for, which is sort of 5K races, 10K races, track work, intervals, tempo stuff, absolutely great. You wouldn't want to wear it all day long, but that's not what this shoe is for. So from that point of view, the fit is great. It's reassuring, it's tight. It really presents a nimble shoe once on the foot. It feels light, it feels makes you want to run fast, basically. I mentioned the energy rods, so what that means when it translates to how it feels on the foot, the shoe just feels a bit more uniform through the gait cycle. Before it wasn't noticeable particularly, but when you compare the two, and I've even put one shoe on and the other one on, gone for a little run, see if they've noticed any difference. It's minute, but it does mean that the one single component energy rod does allow for the shoe to move ever so slightly more in unison when you're going through the gait cycle. I mean, when you're running flat out, who's really noticing that? But at the same time, it does add an element to the shoe which makes it feel more progressive, a bit more alert, a bit more punchy when you're out there really trying your best. So I mentioned what this shoe is all about. This shoe is about going fast over relatively short distances. This will happily carry me and my 85 kilos of bulk around a 5k race in comfort, making me feel fast, trying to get towards that PB time. Depends on what you're like with your running shoes. If you prefer a higher stack shoe, do that. If you're not, if you're used to a slightly more minimalist, like a lower stack shoe, another great option. It's gonna really boil down to how you wanna race and the shoe that you wanna choose when you do it. But this is a great option for interval work, tempos, race day. And it's not just a race day shoe, this is a hard working shoe. If you bought this out every week, took it off to do your speed work, it's gonna last. It's not a shoe that breaks down particularly quickly with sort of overuse. So it's another good factor to take into account when you're shelling out 170 pounds for a running shoe, which you sort of think is quite specific to task, when in fact it's quite a good every sort of training session shoe as well as race day shoe. So that's it. That's version 10 of the Takumi Sen 10. A great shoe for those looking for something to fine-tune race day on the shorter distances, or to make the most of those interval shorter sessions when you want speed is at a premium. Just don't wear it every day.